Hi everyone, welcome to day 2 of Emotions and Essential Oils for the Family. I've been having some technical issues where Facebook won't let me do any live recordings and nor will YouTube. So here we are as a recording. I endeavour to bring you this information one way or another, and hopefully the situation will be fixed and sorted by tomorrow. We shall see. In the meantime, today's aim, the aim for all of this content is to be able to, as a parent like you and me, to be able to navigate whatever comes up, whether it's for ourselves or for our children, with more clarity and more ease. And as a parent or just as a human being, you know that there's a world of stuff that goes on inside of you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically, all 4 of our bodies. And we're not taught how to navigate that landscape. We're not given the tools or the techniques or the information often. So we grow up with doing the best that we possibly can. And we covered a little bit of that yesterday. What happens though, interestingly, is that there's a lot of opportunity for overwhelm, a lot of opportunity for overstimulation. And if you're a sensitive soul like me, or just somebody who feels deeply or has a lot of interaction with your surroundings emotionally, mentally, you will find that overstimulation is something that can happen often. We can see that in our children, like the way that the school system is set up, the way that our work environments are set up, they're not they're designed for output rather than caring for the individual as they go through that experience. So the aim for today's topic especially is to learn how to recognize what overwhelm feels like for you, and then to find ways to help you feel grounded and stable, and have a toolkit, have some options available to you, so that whatever happens, you know there are things that you can do to support you and your children and your family generally. I'm not going to be talking about our furry little friends today, our pets and things like that, because that's a whole different topic of conversation. However, they do experience certain emotions as well. You know, my dog, whilst he was with us, he had anxiety, and so there were certain things that I could do to help him feel better. And it comes down to helping us meet our own needs, and the people in our lives, helping them meet their needs as well. Overwhelm and overstimulation are especially prevalent and an important topic at this time of year, because we're full on in our winter mode. And it takes me a while to get into winter mode. I'm much more of a spring, summer, maybe early autumn kind of person. So winter feels like quite an overwhelming experience. It feels hard and harsh. The spring, summer feels much more light and breezy. And my tendency is to want to hibernate and to go inwards and spend more time within the comfort of my own home. It's a contemplative time of year. And yet the way that our society is set up is potentially this is the time, apart from our summer months, the time when we spend the most amount of time socializing, meeting people, doing things, the school activities after school, they're numerous. We've got lots of plays, we've got lots of parties that we go to. If you're working, then often you'll have I was going to say after school parties, but after work parties, as Christmas do's. So there's a lot of opportunity for doing things where we normally wouldn't be doing them, or maybe not as frequently. And if we look to nature to guide us, because that's one of my favorite things to do. I believe that nature has this profound wisdom that we can learn from and use and mimic and role model from. And at this time of year, everything is becoming more dormant. Things are, I'm not saying things aren't flourishing, like I'm thinking about the mushrooms and the mycelium. They're still flourishing, they're still doing their thing. But certainly trees and plants, they're all going inward. It's a time of, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, a time for coming inside and reserving energy, drawing yourselves in. And whether that means taking a walk in the forest with the family or on your own, and having time just to be at home and find different ways of finding that natural calmer rhythm. And yet the juxtaposition of that is the expectations and all of the shoulds that need to be happening at this time of year. There is definitely an expectation of more time, more people, more food, more sugar, and therefore more opportunities for overwhelm and overstimulation. Now, that's fine if you're somebody who navigates these kind of experiences with ease. You'll know who you are, because you might be listening to this going, well, that doesn't feel like it's relevant to me. But if you're somebody who really does move with the seasons, somebody who does feel that they're fluctuating when it comes to meeting people and being around people and doing things like that, then you'll find that this probably speaks to you more than most. And so creating all of these opportunities for more socialization and more indulgence really can exaggerate an already loud inner world, let's say. So I'm just going to read my notes as we go along, because I don't want to forget anything that I've written. What I'm interested in is what our emotional baseline is. And what does that look like? What does your emotional baseline look like? Are you somebody who knows? Are you familiar with your inner terrain? Are you familiar with what feels like is in alignment for you and what isn't in alignment for you? Can you tell what you need and when you need it? Or are you somebody who's not quite sure what your emotional baseline is? Are you spending a lot of your time overstimulated and overwhelmed? Maybe if you imagine a traffic light system, it may be that a calm baseline is that green area. And then when you're feeling stressed and agitated, overwhelmed, feeling you're constantly in that should space, I should be doing this, should be doing that, feeling the pressure mounting, or maybe a constant sense of pressure, you may start to be having some physical symptoms as well, like jaw ache or backache, or maybe dandruff, and your skin is starting to get affected, your sleep's affected, maybe you've got IBS. And then red, just for clarification, red is when you go into fight, flight, freeze, when you're in that freeze situation where actually you've probably had some sort of really significant trauma that you're trying to process, or maybe not even aware that you need to process it. So just keeping that in mind, that if you're constantly in that orange bandwidth, you might find that even just sitting on the sofa feels like an uncomfortable experience. So I'm going to encourage you to explore what this means to you and how you can navigate this to find calm within yourself. And we're going to talk about some of those practices today. But equally, that's important, because whatever we're doing, we're role modeling to our children too, and those around us. So if we're aware of our inner landscape and how that affects us and where we are, let's say we're on a scale of 1 to 100, and we can follow and flow ourselves along that scale and know what needs to be put in place to bring ourselves back down towards the sort of the 10 and under scale, then we'll be using that language and the behavior and the role model for our children as well. So that could feel like there's some pressure there. I've certainly felt pressure before around needing to be able to master these things myself. But there's also a lot of value in learning this stuff as you go along, and then being with your children and learning it together. In fact, they can really see a lot of the time when we get to a certain place of development, there's been many times when I've looked at something or worked on something for myself, and I've made a significant shift in how I approach myself, and therefore it shifts and it changes how I approach my environment. And it's like my son is already waiting for me at that point, going, oh, finally, here you are. I've been waiting for you to get to this point. Because there's a sense of clarity, a sense of openness and opening that happens, where there's more understanding, more connection, more intimacy in our relationships, and stability. There's an inherent sense of stability, because when we're constantly in overwhelm, and that projects as a almost like a vibrating energy within our environment. Our cats will feel it, our animals will feel it, our children will feel it, our partners will feel it too. And not that we're responsible on the whole for these people, but we are bringing more awareness to ourselves. We are bringing more awareness to what we do, what we don't do, how we are, for the purposes of feeling better, for the purposes of creating a much more deeper relationship with ourselves. And that's key for me. That really is key. So what does your emotional baseline look like? You can write this out, have a think about it, contemplate it, and think about it as if it's on a continuous line. And it varies and can shift from moment to moment. It can shift from day to day. It really is a very fluid experience, but you'll find that once you start to incorporate some of these tools, the range of overwhelm will reduce significantly, because you're not waiting until you're in that 90th percentile before you support yourself. You're noticing the early warning signs a lot quicker, so then you can step in and support yourself and your family. And you're like little red flags when you're first dating somebody, and you get the little red flags. Maybe before you'd be like, oh, that's a red flag, I'm just going to pretend that's not happening. But now you're like, wait a second, that's a red flag, I'm going to watch that and I'm going to pay attention to it. So when you're in alignment, for me, it can feel, my baseline feels like my shoulders are relaxed, my jaw is calm. When I'm out of alignment, I definitely tense my jaw. I start to pick at at the fingers here. So if I ever start to notice that that's happening, that's an outward tell that I'm reaching some level of overwhelm internally. If for children, it can look like, and for adults, it can look like anger, it can look like tearfulness, feeling overtired and tearful. So there's not a range, there's not a lot of scope between, a range between feeling okay and feeling overwhelmed. It gets a lot shorter when we're in this space. Yeah, so irritable, exhausted, angry, and hyper. That's another one. We think sometimes often that when we're overwhelmed, we might go inwards and come in on ourselves and feel really exhausted. But actually, the opposite is also true, that we can feel really hyper. And both of those are our adrenal glands going, the stress hormones, the cortisol. Both of those will eventually and long term, especially if we're adding in that processed food, the alcohol, the extra Christmas mince pies and all that kind of stuff, it will affect long term, or actually short term, your immune system. So just having that awareness already gives you a sense of empowerment that you can do something about it. So the things, and these things don't happen just overnight. They are a slow build-up. So maybe you started at just before Halloween, and now it's going to be like that until the new year. And it will be I'll just have one, I'll just do this, I'll just go to this party, I'll just go to here, I'll just do this, I'll just do this. And in of themselves, they don't seem like such a big deal. But when you start stacking them up, there could potentially be a tipping point when you go from feeling this is just about manageable to this isn't manageable. So having that awareness bringing that sense of understanding that when you get to, you don't need to get to that point, you're allowed to say no. So as we'll come on to that in a minute, but what this looks like for me and how I manage overwhelm is, especially at this time of year, is I make sure that I don't over socialize. I also, it helps for me to make sure that I'm getting enough sleep. Sleep for me is really critical to make sure I'm not overstimulated and overwhelmed. Sometimes I need quiet, like absolute quiet, maybe some noise cancelling headphones, or I will actually go to bed earlier so I can get up earlier. So when the house is completely quiet, that's my time for a couple of hours just to meditate, to be with myself, to use the oils in these ways. And I am therefore actively helping my future emotions by being in the present with myself now. And the same goes for my son. His sleep is the thing that gets affected the most. So when he starts to get into overwhelm, his sleep shortens, and then it's a vicious cycle. So we have a really robust sleep hygiene regime, which includes the bath time that we talked about yesterday, some binaural beats, some guided meditation, going to bed early, and he loves being read to. So we do a lot of the reading of the books as well. And that really helps his emotions. And we talk a lot about emotions. We talk about how are you feeling, what's been good for you, what's going on for you. And then I do the same thing. So I'm role modeling how I'm being with him also. And we all know what our children are like. We know them better than they know themselves. Okay, so when he starts to show those first signs of tells, and for him it can be tearfulness or a little bit more sassy than usual, I know that there's a plan that needs to go into place to help him feel better tomorrow. So what we do today is how we're going to feel tomorrow. That goes for food, that goes for emotions, that goes for generally anything that we're banking for tomorrow to help us feel better. So what can we do to support ourselves during this time when we get overwhelmed, when we are overstimulated? And I've split these into 3 categories, and 2 of them are quite similar, but there's the children, the teens, and the adults. So for children, sensory play can be really super effective and supportive. So I buy lots of corn flour, and we make oobleck. You can check that out. Just type in on YouTube oobleck recipe. Basically, it's just corn flour and water. But he loves to play with it, and he will play with it for hours and hours and hours. And it's edible. It's easy to wash down. It's easy to clean. And it's really sensory. There's a lot of sensory feedback, and when he's in that overwhelmed state, this is something that really helps him. Same with sand, although I'm not a fan of having sand in the house, but he loves it. Water of any kind, bathing, lots of toys to play with, that kind of thing is really super useful. Bubbles are really good too. You can get some those blow up foam bubbles. That feels nice when you can squish them. Anything that feels really sensory can be lovely. If you've got any extra ideas or suggestions, please put them in the comments, and then everyone can benefit from your suggestions as well. So for teens, things that help with overwhelm, and we're dealing with the outcome rather than the cause. Okay, so I want you to explore both of those. What's the cause of the overwhelm and what's the outcome? So with the outcome, things like water and bathing is really good. Binaural beats, calming the nervous system down by listening to something is really helpful. Singing and dancing can really release a lot of the inner tension that can be accumulated inside the body, as well as movement and breath work. Now, if that's something that's new to you, then breath work can be super easy to do. You just start with the box breath. That's the simplest place to start. So you go Breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5, and hold for 5. You can trace it with your finger. That works too. Or this is something that I used to do with some of the autistic kids when I taught yoga, is you hold up your hand and you breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Slowly breathe in, breathe out, and keep going. And then you come all the way down the arm. And you can do that again. You can do that as many times as you want. Just take your time as you're going up and down. I did it a little bit fast there just to show you. But that's super helpful too. And we'll come on to the oils in a second. Then for adults, the first thing I want you to know is that you don't have to do all the shoulds. I'm going to give you permission. I want you to give yourself permission to not have to do all the shoulds. You don't have to do them all. You are allowed to say no, even if people have some sort of comment about your what you're doing or how you're doing it. That's fine, isn't it? It is fine. It's completely up to you what you do with your time and how you manage your life experience. So say no more if you want to at this time of year. Say yes to the things that you want to, obviously, but you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to give yourself permission to have the night off, to go to bed early, to have a bath, to take some bubbles with you to the bath, whatever it is that you want to do. And then cut down on the stimulants. That's really key. We tend to think that this is a time of indulgence, and whilst that can be true, it doesn't have to be indulgent every single day, because like I say, little bits mount up, and by the time the week's over, you feel rubbish, you're short-tempered, you're grouchy, and it doesn't feel good. And then it comes out with the children and with the family and all that kind of stuff. So, and then the same thing as the teens: singing, dancing, breath work, and movement. Movement is really good too. So even getting down on your yoga mat or going for a walk can be a time that's just for you. A time that's just for you. You don't have to be everything to everybody. Okay. So let's talk about essential oils. And there's 3 that I want to mention today. The first is wild orange, and also known as sweet orange, but if you use the doTERRA oils, then it is wild orange. Wild orange is bubbly. It's about shifting perspective. It's about playfulness. And above all, it's about regulation and balance. It helps calm things out. It's got the properties of like a balm for your soul. It really is super, super relaxing. And the easiest and the best place to do that is in Shen Men, which we covered yesterday, which is that little crevice of the ear in here. You can do that on both sides. If you're using it with yourself or with children, then dilute it to a 25%, especially during the summer months when it is photoreactive. So it will burn the skin. So just be mindful of that. But 25% is fine. If you don't want it on, and here's a tip for parents who have children who don't want to actively be part of any sort of oil experience. The first is, that's okay. You role model the experience, and they may or may not at some point join the bandwagon. You can also put them in the diffuser. That works just as well. Wild orange and peppermint are fantastic for uplifting, for helping people get going and to bring some energy back to the room. But you don't have to use an essential oil on this point. You can just use your finger on the point without an oil. That works fine. And it's a really lovely thing if your children are lying down and you're doing the practice on them. That can be super sweet. I've done that with my son before and he really loves it. So number 2 is frankincense. Oh, these are just such fantastic oils. I could talk for hours and hours about each one of these. They are just so incredible, especially in emotional regulation, especially with supporting us through these times. And frankincense helps to slow down the breathing. It helps to frankincense works spiritually in terms of time. So if you're stuck in the future or in the past, then and you're worrying about something that's going to happen, or you're worrying about something that hasn't happened, and this too works for children. Okay, they have that ability to be really moving between time and space as well. Frankincense helps bring you back to the present moment, where you feel you can have control, where you feel in this moment everything is okay. And it helps with the flow of thoughts. We can get really stuck. Yeah, do you know what I mean? When a thought gets stuck and it's either looping or you can't think past it, or especially when there's some sort of anxiety, it can get really sticky and stuck. So I want you to have a think about using frankincense on GV20, which is the top of the crown of your head, and just hold it there. And you can do this for protection as well, energetic protection. That's super helpful. But just holding that there, and you can create that as a protocol last thing at night before going to bed, or first thing in the morning, or wherever you need it. But that's lovely, just there. And then the last one is Palmarosa, which smells a little bit like lemongrass, but is a little bit sweeter. And again, we want to be diluting all of these oils. Palmarosa is all about clarifying and creating perspective, and around clearing density, clearing those times when we get stuck in our heads in terms of overwhelm. So if there was one oil that I would say is incredible for overwhelm, it would be Palmarosa, because it helps bring us back into our heart space, coming from this space which is so much more expansive and can help us breathe and open up, rather than being in our heads all the time when it can feel very constrictive and tight. So CV12 for this one. So CV8 is your belly button, CV17 is your heart chakra. So if you find the middle point between those two, on your midline down the center of your body, and then just gently put your finger on a point there and hold it until it feels like you've got a shift. So those are the three oils. You can use those oils in any way, and they are still supportive for overwhelm. So you can use them in a diffuser. You can inhale them very simply. You could put them on your skin as some sort of, well, especially frankincense, maybe not so much wild orange, but you can use them as a body oil, moisturizer, and then put them on the points or in the bath. And that's what I forgot to say yesterday. If you're going to put the oils in the bath, get some Epsom salts, and then put the oil on top of the Epsom salt so it sinks in and then disperses. Otherwise, the oil will just sit on top of the bath and it will stick to the skin. And if you're very sensitive, or your child is, obviously children have got sensitive skin, it may feel more irritating that way. So just make sure that you put it in the Epsom salts and then in the bath. And that's it. That's a sweet and brief introduction to overwhelm and overstimulation at this time of year. The principles that we've talked about today are applicable to absolutely everybody at any time of the year. You can the beauty of this is you can even take these into work with you, or take a little bit and put it. See, I've got one of these little bracelets that I got from one of my friends who's locally, Laura at Boho, beautiful Boho. And what you can do is you can put the oil on top of the bracelet and then wear it, and the scent will still be working with you too. Here we go. That's so lovely. This information is so important. To have a toolkit, can you imagine what it would have been like when you were a kid if you'd had access to this kind of information, and to be able to support yourself as you're growing and developing and becoming an adult, and knowing that there are things that you can do for yourself rather than emotionally numbing. It's really powerful, really, really powerful. So I'm going to announce the winner of the day 2 giveaway. The day 2 giveaway is a unique blend of these 3 oils specific for overwhelm and overstimulation. It's going to be a blend that can be used for you or your child, or any family member that you wish. So I'm going to put the giveaway in, the results in the Facebook group, and then I shall let you know. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and let's hope tomorrow there are less interference with the YouTube and the Facebook electricity. Take care. Have a good day.